such as those of Ireland, Estonia, and Hungary, and Malaysia, these economies now spend much more on R&D and on education than the region's economies do at present. What about Jordan? Governments in the region therefore face one more opportunity to get things right or get things wrong. As Nader Qabbani of the Brookings Institute writes, the region is not, however, without its multiple bright spots. One such spot is possibly Jordan, which has been one of the largest ICT ecosystems in the world. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, in the region, but also in the world, over $2.2 billion, and I'm talking in relative terms, in the region and the world, thinking locally and acting globally, and over 600 ICT companies and 300 startups that enjoy a high performance potential in terms of export intensity, female employment, high wage job creation, and technology transfer and diffusion. In fact, at 3.9%, the ICT sector's contribution to Jordan's GDP is, believe it or not, and everything is relative, on par with the EU's 3.8%. Dubbed by some as the Arab world's Silicon Valley, Jordan, though lacking in such areas as networking and risk capital, outperforms the region in product innovation, technology absorption, competition, startup skills, and cultural support. This is so important to me to mention cultural support because I don't find that there's anything inherently cultural about globalization. But our mindset is changing. In addition, the country has improved its ranking on the Global Entrepreneurship Index by a whopping 23 places in a mere span of 4 years. Opportunities in the agri-tech and fintech sectors abound. Opportunities in the sharing economy abound too. And lastly, what about the future? Which directions? If over the next 100 years AI and robotic systems will increasingly dominate labor and work, then both government and industry must inject both thought and thoughtful action into this process of transformation. For if we acknowledge and understand that this process is inherently contingent as opposed to predetermined or preordained, only then will we be able to artifact out of the fourth industrial revolution an event worthy of the dignity of man. Enabling corporate and government frameworks for unlocking a technology-driven, dignified future for all does exist. One need, in fact, not look too far. And the challenges that need to be overcome by a region such as mine have been well documented. Indeed, policy recommendations abound. Working as I do with interfaith dialogue, I salute the Pontifical Council on Social Sciences, which has pointed out that no commonly accepted vision on the future exists, no matter how hard we think about imagining the future. There is no doubt that the future will increasingly lie between, on the one hand, technology, climate change, greater connectivity and multipolarity, and on the other, demographic growth, economic growth, urbanization, and energy consumption. Neither Luddist-like technophobia, which sees in technology at the end of humanity, nor hyper-optimistic exaltation, which sees before itself only a wonderful and problem-free future, will lead to the lucidity necessary to both understand and consciously shape the future. Marrying the 2030 agenda, marrying this agenda for sustainable development to the promise of the fourth industrial revolution in the region is possibly the world's best, the regions of the world's best hope for moving forward. But I would like to say that progress towards many of the agenda's goals was still not on track in early 2020. And while the pandemic has left no corner of the globe unscathed, the pandemic has, however, also underscored the potential for technology to meet familiar and new challenges alike. The potential for the Internet of Things, AI, big data, behavioral and predicative analytics, and blockchain technologies to drive forward real-time public policy development and interventions, public policy, ladies and gentlemen, not politics, but policy, durable policy, is both great and well documented. And yet issues ranging from the reproduction of data-embedded human bias and prejudice by such machine learning systems to the opacity of the decision-making processes of these systems abound. It's easy to see, as Casper van den Berg, chair of the Global and Local Governance of the University of Groningen, writes, how public policy making in the future will have much less the shape of measures and action programs and much more the shape of principles and purposes, since policy planning will have been replaced by data as opposed to evidence-driven real-time policy adaptation. And since the distinction between public services, delivery agencies, and private sector contractors will begin to disappear, I come to the conclusion of I care, therefore I am. And you'll forgive me for my shortcomings, but I would like to say that a rule-based, humanitarian, law of peace is my internet, as opposed to my internet. Motivationally, I would like to suggest that it's not so much a question of what governments can do to positively impact future society, nor is it a question of what industry and science can do to affect positive social change. The future, to Hannah Arendt, is then very much a question of our plurality, our intra-independence, our respect for one another, and our ability to commit to creative commons. The fact, says Hannah Arendt, that men, not man, live on the earth and inhabit the world is, to quote another great man of his time, the basis of the wind of change that we have to envisage and work hard to achieve. Not winds of change, but the wind of change. It is therefore a question of whether industry and science, government and government can drive forward a purpose-driven, accountable, and rights-based framework for good governance. For how we navigate the next decade in human history will have a profound impact on the legacies that our children and grandchildren and their children will have to grapple with. So the question I would leave you with is, can we construct an era in which the dignity of men and women is upheld, nay, empowered and enabled and promoted in an area in which we promote well-being and security both for ourselves and for our loved ones, neither through a profit at any price mindset, nor by directing precarity at others, but by way of the recognition that each of us, every member of our species, is endowed with the capacity for radical novelty and a profound new beginning. Lastly, Descartes distilled the spirit of the scientific revolution of the 17th century into one phrase: I think, therefore I am. It is possible to distill the yet unformulated spirit of the fourth industrial revolution into the phrase, I care, therefore I am. It was also Descartes who said that if everything in this world is West, where does the sun rise? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And in thanking you, I want to thank all of you, those of you who have contributed to these remarks, without whom I would not have stood before you. I thank the Crown Prince Foundation of Jordan and Ms. Tamam Mango of the Royal Scientific Society, the Ministry of Digital Economy and Entrepreneurship, and last and by no means least, Dr. Khalid Touqan. I'd also like to thank you in La Coruña for offering me this unique opportunity. Assalamu alaikum.
And we thank you, His Royal Highness Prince Al Hassan bin Talal. Powerful words. Thank you for the reminder that the future certainly is uncertain, that complacency, as he said, is not an option, and that we are truly at an inflection point where we have the opportunity as respective stakeholders in each of our spaces to do something different, a particular call of action to governments to make that important sea change now. Thank you again. We're next going to pivot into a very granular, important discussion around the metaverse by Barmak Hashmat, my good friend. He's the founder and CEO of Brelion. And interestingly, he was the former head of optics at Meta Augmented Reality. He has a PhD in electrical engineering and a postdoc from MIT. He's given 7 TED Talks at this point. He's a wonderful speaker, and he's going to challenge you around not only hypothetically, in a visionary sort of way, discussing the metaverse, but getting granular with you in terms of talking about how we build the metaverse. Barmak.
Good afternoon, Coruña. How's it going? All right. Open the gates and let the virtual world descend upon this city. So today I'm going to talk about metaverse and really what are the things that we have to consider when building a metaverse. I come from engineering background, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. So the virtual worlds are here. Tens of billions of dollars have been invested, and there's this notion that we're going to experience the internet soon in a radically different way than the way we experience it today. But radical how? Well, for starters, we're expected to experience our Zoom call more like plastic video games. Our productivity tools are supposed to turn into Mario game, map, and the video games are supposed to get so immersive that if you touch that joystick once, you're going to get sucked into that game for the rest of your life. These virtual worlds are creating virtual ecosystems that are forming around them. So there's cryptocurrencies that everybody is talking about, and digital currencies that really enable selling new goods that weren't able to possibly able to transact in these mediums, all the way from arts and graphics and NFTs to digital lands and renting them and so on. There's also emerging marketplaces for these digital currencies and cryptocurrencies. And if you look at the numbers, the metaverse is projected to have around $670 billion revenue, generating around $670 billion revenue by 2030, which is the sort of hallmark of this conference, Ecosystem 2030. And that's data from Statista. What's interesting is that if you ask the Gen Zers, they predict that, more than half of them predict that they're going to be working in the metaverse by 2030. So they think that instead of going to your computer OS, you're going to actually log into this game or enter this graphic 3D environment that you're going to be working there. And you're going to be transacting with NFTs and cryptocurrencies, and somehow this is going to be better. Or is it? Well, if you think about the historic trajectory of humans blending with computers, I like to divide that into 5 different levels, very much like autonomous cars. So the level 1 was the age of communication. We discovered the bidirectional communication channels, and that gave birth to things like phones and radio and TV and broadcasting, and that was the age of communication. Then, around 2-3 decades ago, we started to transition to the age of guided attention, where we could now build databases and data platforms and build these kind of 2D attention guide maps, which we call apps today, kind of like a board game that we could guide the user to do certain things. And that was the age of smartphones and PC computers. And what is very natural is that now we are transitioning from that age to the age of presence, where it's all about the environment, the experience. And that's enabled by new types of displays, virtual displays, headsets, augmented reality, virtual reality, and so on. But it doesn't stop there. I think after the age of metaverse, which is this transition from guided attention to presence, there's going to be the age of realism, where these virtual worlds start to actually evolve by themselves, maybe by AI or maybe by interacting with the users, and have simulated physics and are connected to real worlds by very powerful telerobotics. And so that will be the age of realism. And then after that is the final stage of human-computer evolution, which is the age of unification, which might be powered by things like tandem computers, brain-computer interfaces, and that's where your thoughts really is reflected in the virtual world, effortlessly. So it really seems like a natural evolution of the trajectory that we have had to where we are. But what is really the increment delta of having more presence? What does presence give us that we don't have today that can be better? Like, what's the value there? So, us at Brilliant, we have been really thinking about this question for a long time. And if you put the metaverse under the microscope and somehow dissect it to its elements, there are 6 key elements. On the technology side, you have graphics technologies like computer graphics and blockchain and display technology. And on the human side, you have human reflexes, human perception, especially visual perception, and human incentives. So that's kind of the incentive, the reason you want to be interacting with the virtual world. Maybe it's making more money, or maybe getting more return on your investment, or other goals you may have. But the problem is that immersion is not necessarily the direct parallel with value. In fact, most of the successful games today, like Minecraft and Roblox, are not really very immersive games. They're more addictive than immersive. Also, immersion doesn't mean more efficiency. If I get your emails and throw it on the walls around you and put you in the center of it, this doesn't mean that you can answer more emails all of a sudden, right? On the economy side of metaverse, there's also a lot of sort of uncertainty about the value change and the security of these assets, and so those are other problems that needs to be solved. So if you think about immersion is really this higher visual bandwidth that you're giving. At least that's the big delta there. And that helps in certain applications. For example, if you want to simulate an environment for an architect, if you want to simulate or replicate a training session virtually, or if you want to simulate an event that is very expensive to do in real world, there's some value there. There's also a lot of anchoring point around spatial features, like, for example, spatial multiplexing of tasks, spatial navigations, or spatial related experiences like digital travel and things of that nature. And telepresence is also similar category. Telepresence, telework, teleoperation. So these are the values that immersion brings, but it goes beyond that. What's really interesting is that immersion has this kind of attractiveness to it that pulls people in. And Gen Zers are already grown up in this sort of gamified environment. So businesses has to go where the people are, where the attention of the new generation is. And that's one of the key features. Also, the cryptocurrencies go beyond just, being an interesting, hip type of currency. It also allows you to have more freedom, more flexibility, and fidelity on monetizing very, very small features, all the way down to like a single click or a single tweet. Now you can make those an NFT or monetize them, and so on. So for immersion to be functional, there's really three key values or key elements: comfort, immersion, and performance. And unless you don't have performance and comfort, the immersion by itself is not really going to help you much. So how can we give access to this functional immersion? Should we just design a display that is super high resolution, very high fidelity, really cool headset, or should we have humans in mind? Based on my experience in the world of headsets, I would say 99% of the time, you should put humans first. Technology comes second. So metaverse will be built around places where people are, where people's attentions are. And what's really an interesting question here is that, well, how much more immersive these displays should be for us to be able to see that iPhone moment change, where people start to adapt and adopt these immersive technologies. And that's a very, very delicate dance between comfort, access, and immersion. So three key things. A lot of companies have died between these three key things. And I like to call it the Bermuda triangle of display technologies. So you need all these three to be able to really get that iPhone moment. So let's break down immersion a little bit more. It comes down to the visual perception, and modeling that visual perception and human perception is really a field of its own. There's a lot of research done here. But I'm going to summarize it very quickly. Basically, when you look at human perception, the human perception can be estimated as a bit rate of information that is coming to your brain, right? And it is composed of different components, and these components are all following saturating functions, okay? So for example, you cannot see infinite frame rate. You cannot see infinite resolution. These are all limited functions. So the goal of a great platform for metaverse, the way you should build a platform for metaverse, is really to be able to maximize that perceived bit rate by minimizing the bandwidth that you're using. And that's one of the key elements. So on accessibility and immersiveness and comfort, you can break all of these down to its elements and really find scores for each of these. I'm not going to go through all of this, but basically you can really mathematically find when is that iPhone moment going to happen for a headset or for a new display or for a new emerging technology by putting humans' experience in the center of it. And based on that, here's our prediction. So we think for cell phones, you're going to have augmented reality glasses, which are going to be, more accessible to the public, larger population, easy to carry around. But they're not going to be very high performance. For your mobile computing, you're going to have headsets, most likely virtual reality, video see-through headsets. And for your desktop experiences, you're going to have virtual displays, virtual monitors that you don't even have to wear. And that's what we're working on. So really different modalities for different ways of experiencing the metaverse and virtual worlds. Now, there's a lot of investors and executives in this audience, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about how to empower the ecosystem for emerging sort of metaverse. And I can break down the technology layers of realizing metaverse into 7 layers. Not going to go through all these 7 layers, but these are the 3 key sort of main categories. The hardware infrastructure, the hard infrastructure, not necessarily hardware, but hardware and databases and so on, the soft infrastructure, and the user experience layer. Okay? For hard infrastructure, basically, super VCs are great here, and this is mostly for people with deep, deep pockets. Okay? For soft layer infrastructure, larger VCs are great. You can spend a little bit more capital and sort of capture more of that market. And the higher level, which is mostly on goods and sort of experiences, those are great for smaller VCs. So you can make fast return with smaller amount of capital. So now let's look at how bigger companies are approaching metaverse at different layers and segments. You can see that Meta is investing in all of these layers of this pyramid. Microsoft is doing in the layers that is more synergic with legacy Microsoft products. Same with Sony and Apple and Google and so on. And then when it comes to slightly smaller companies, then you have more attention to that infrastructure layer, because that's how you can get more vertically integrated to metaverse. For smaller companies, you're mostly focusing at some of these layers, but not all the way down to the infrastructure layers. Like, for example, Roblox, you start from marketplace to environments to gigs and services and goods. And for Epic Games, they are doing maybe a couple of the layers, and Unity and Unreal and so on. But there is interesting growing opportunities at Metaverse for sort of startups that are budding, and these are startups that have a key core technology, but also have one slice of the pyramid at the top. So, for example, Leia, they have core display technology, but they also have marketplace and environments. Fodor is a company that have their own AI engine, and they generate NFTs, right? So they have the goods, they generate the goods, but they have the core technology as well. Same with Decentraland, they have environment, and they generate goods there. Admix is a very interesting startup. For example, they have a payment engine, and they monetize advertisements in the game, right? So again, one layer at the deep tech and sort of certain niche application at the top. Same with Brelion. But there's another interesting set of opportunities, which is for solving inevitable problems with metaverse. So, for example, Electrum, which is a crypto wallet, is an inevitable problem. If you're going to have cryptocurrencies, you want to keep it safe, you need a wallet, so you need a service for that. If there's going to be metaverses, you need influencers there, so that platform to provide influencers is an inevitable problem, so Metafluence is a solution to that. So going back to the key elements of metaverse, as I mentioned, when you look at it under the microscope, these are sort of the elements that you see. But in reality, metaverse is just an oversimplified vision of the future of the internet. And in reality, these technologies and these components from human perception, human incentives, and human reflexes are going to interact with each other. And in the intersections of these interactions, that's where the biggest values are. That's where the billion-dollar companies, the next Amazon, the next unicorns are. And you can frame it however you like, but it goes far beyond this sort of monolithic idea of metaverse. All right, thank you so much. That's it.
Fantastic. I'm so thrilled. Not only does he provide this interesting landscape scan, but he's providing for us some very sort of technical blue ocean opportunities within the space of the metaverse. It's exciting. So our next guest is a bit of a pivot again. Hal Reisiger. He's the CEO of Cosworth Group. He's a self-described glutton for punishment. I asked him to explain what he meant, and he said, I'm a glutton for punishment because I essentially tackle transformation challenges that no one wants to take on. So he works with businesses who are required, in order to remain relevant, to make some significant technological transformation. And he finds that very few people want to do that. He's a turnaround guy. And at the end of the day, he said that it is important for all of us to understand not only that transformation can take place or that we have the technological tools to enable transformation, but that we get all of the stakeholders in the space on board with skin in the game so that they understand the why of transformation. And he argues that will be the only way that we can effectively propel transformation. How?
So I think many of you might have expected that I was going to wow you with bits and bytes and metaverse and all kinds of technical stuff. And I actually had a different idea about this presentation. So I want to ask a question, if there are any Brits in the audience, or who knows the meaning of teaching grandma to suck eggs? Raise your hand. So I didn't want to stand up here and talk about things that you already knew and teach you how to suck eggs, because we've heard from so many great speakers about so many great topics. So instead, I'm going to approach it from a cautionary tale. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the extraordinary opportunities in transportation technology, but we're going to also talk about some of the things that we have to be aware of and avoid. And you've heard some of the other speakers talk about this during the past 2 days.
Listen up, people. I know a thing or two about extinction. And let me tell you, and you'd kind of think this would be obvious, going extinct is a bad thing. And driving yourselves extinct? In 70 million years, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. At least we had an asteroid. What's your excuse? You're headed for a climate disaster, and yet every year governments spend hundreds of billions of public funds on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine if we had spent hundreds of billions per year subsidizing giant meteors. Let me be real for a second. You've got a huge opportunity right now. As you rebuild your economies and bounce back from this pandemic, this is humanity's big chance. So here's my wild idea. Don't choose extinction. Save your species before it's too late. It's time for you humans to stop making excuses and start making changes. Thank you.
That was actually played at the United Nations, by the way. So just think about it. When most of us were young children, what did your parents tell you? Eat your vegetables. Later on, they probably told you not to do drugs. You may not have listened to that one. And then now we're talking about telling our children not to go extinct. So, you know, the massive transformation and changes that are going on in the world. So every day we read about it, we heard about it for the last 2 days, the need for climate-friendly technologies. And I think we'd all agree a large part of that focus, without a doubt, is on transportation. So interestingly enough, these are some statistics from PwC on climate tech investment. So the tech investment is more than tripling, but only 20% of it is focused on emission reduction technologies. Seems pretty extraordinary. So in 2020, 28 billion, fair amount of money in 1 year. It went up 210% in 2021. 14 cents of every dollar going to climate tech. But when you look at where the money's invested, the top 5 technology solutions that would contribute to emission reduction only got 25% of that investment. So the big themes that we hear about every day: electrification, autonomy, mobility as a service. I think we have to ask ourselves a question. When it comes to these themes, why yet do we not have mass adoption? So if you look at electrification, 0.5% of vehicles in operation globally are electric. So in spite of all the headlines about the increase in EV sales, only 0.5% today of vehicles in operation are electric. For autonomy, believe it or not, in the last decade, over $100 billion has been invested in autonomy. And then you take a look at where the state of autonomy is, and we've got certainly trials of certain confined and controlled areas with autonomous vehicles. Mass consumer vehicles are still only at level 3 after $100 billion and a decade of work and investment. So I call it the law of unintended consequences, because all the technologies that we have always have the best intention, but it's how we deploy them that I think we need to really focus on and consider. And I know that stuff seems pretty bizarre, doesn't it? But all of those are actual events. And so we have to ask ourselves, why does this happen? So I call it ready, fire, aim, right? How much time and effort are we putting in before we deploy technologies? And there was a couple of people, I think it was even today, we were talking about how quickly we deploy technologies without considering all of the participants in the ecosystem and all the stakeholders, and what kind of a job we could do if we did that before we deployed the technologies. So an example, e-scooters. These are like the scourge of major cities. Yet they have the ability to help address urban mobility and congestion. Great technology, nothing wrong with it. It was the deployment of the technology that was flawed. These are actually banned in more US cities than they're allowed nowadays, right? And you see some of the examples in the video and the pictures as to why. So another one, government mandates. I'm not a believer that government should mandate technology. I think they should mandate the outcomes or the goals. So in this particular case, we've got governments banning internal combustion engines, which by all account ends up legislating electric vehicles. Yet we still don't have mass adoption. We still don't have the infrastructure. We still, and take a look, and there was some references to this with earlier speakers, is the geopolitical issues with the raw materials, where they're coming from, what's the state of the technology. So I'm not anti-EV, but I'm suggesting that there's a proper technical solution depending upon the application, and that government shouldn't mandate those. So one of the things that we're a big believer in is life cycle assessment. So while I was here, there was an event that I was invited to. It was an investor summit. And there were investors that were there to talk about decarbonization. And the interesting thing was there were EV people, there was internal combustion engine investors, there was renewable energy investors, and there was a whole range of different investor technologies. So after spending a couple of days together, they came up with a handful of outcomes from their discussions. One is that electric vehicles are not zero emission. The other is that electrify things when you can, though, for the future. The other is that if you can't electrify it, use low-carbon fuels. And we talked about this a little bit during the panel event when I spoke about having a range of concurrent technologies deployed not trying to force a transition between one technology and another that's not ready for mass adoption. The other is that internal combustion engines of fossil fuels, like it or not, are going to be around for a while, and that hybrid is also a very important solution, and they want to mandate and regulate life cycle assessment. Now, why is this so important? How can an EV not be zero emission? Well, you've got to start at the fuel cycle for anything that begins with the production of components or the vehicle itself. So if you're starting off with renewable or you're starting off with clean hydrogen, you're going to have the outcome of a true zero-emission vehicle. But if you look at the different parts of the life cycle assessment, all of which have to be considered before you declare something zero emission, then you've got the use, you've got the raw material extraction. There was an interesting study recently done on ethanol. And ethanol is supposed to help with the combustion process, and it's supposed to improve efficiency. But they found out that the actual agricultural steps to get the ethanol out of the ground create more carbon than they're saving by putting ethanol in the gas, because they're not considering life cycle assessment. And the proper life cycle assessment is also going to include, as you can see, post-consumer scrap, reuse, remanufacturing. So until we consider every one of the steps or elements of life cycle assessment, you'll never be able to declare something truly 100% green. So for us, the focus being the planet, mobility, safety, is that we need a collaborative ecosystem. There was an article I read the other day before coming here, and it's a gentleman that wants to relaunch e-scooters, but he wants to do it with proper agreement and regulation. What are the power limitations? What are the traffic lanes? What are the control mechanisms so they don't get littered all over the place? So again, I think e-scooters have the ability to help address these urban mobility congestion challenges, but they have to be done properly. So we look at investing in technologies that reduce emissions, change the weighting of where investments are made, have to consider, even if necessary, legislate life cycle assessment, and then ensure that it's sustainable, whether it's regionalization or globalization. This is a big issue now when you look at who's controlling the key raw materials that are necessary to make a battery with today's battery technology. Select the technology most appropriate for the application. It's kind of a law of physics. You're not going to put a big giant battery in a big giant truck and have that be efficient and effective. You have to look at other technologies, fuel cells, range extenders, and other means of reducing the carbon footprint. One size does not fit all. And then government support from R&D through to production. We've got a situation in the UK right now where there's massive support and investments to make battery cells, but that's only one element of the entire supply chain. There's no investment being made throughout the supply chain, and we're pushing real hard on that. And then again, collaborate with all the stakeholders before you deploy it. Municipalities, regulatory, insurers if it's appropriate, the consumer, but make sure they're all involved in assessing how to properly deploy technology. So for us, this is Cosworth's focus on the future and how do we enable our customers to make a successful transition to clean and intelligent mobility. So in spite of the dinosaur and extinction, we are optimistic. You know, the increasing awareness, talked about the children being told don't go extinct. Probably our children have a much greater sense of climate change than we do. And it's a good thing to see, but that increase in awareness needs to continue. The willingness to invest, you look at the amount of money that's being invested, VC, private equity and the like, there's no shortage of it, but are those being invested in technologies that are going to bring within our lifetimes the meaningful reduction in the impact on the climate? And there's almost no limit to the potential of the technologies. It's how do we make sure the right technology is in the right application for the right vehicle and vehicle space. So working together, we're confident we can drive the innovation and collaboration. We're just proposing that we do it and put more time in the front end of the process with all the stakeholders before we unleash technologies. So together, I think we can avoid extinction. So who's going to join the road? This is what we're up to. So thank you very much for your time.
He was on time, perfectly on time. Self-described glutton for punishment. We love Hal and all of his expertise that he constantly brings to us. Next guest is going to join us via hologram. We have Federico Casaleño, who is the Executive Vice President of Samsung Electronics. He's going to discuss with us, again, a recurring theme we've heard throughout these sessions on the central role of design in human-centered metaverse. Let's listen.
Hello, my name is Federico Casaleño, and I am an Executive Vice President at Samsung. Thank you for the invitation to speak at Ecosystem 2030. Despite not being there in person, today I'm excited to talk about the metaverse through an hologram. And if you take away only one message, please remember this. Technology without humanity is perfection without purpose. And today, we have the chance to design and build a humanity-centered metaverse. I will explain this with 4 key points. The first one, the metaverse is not just technology. We are building a new human environment. Second, the metaverse represents a huge shift from mass media to social media and now immersive media. Third, we're also developing great opportunities for synthetic reality that can help us to make a better physical world. 4, designers should be at the very center of developing the metaverse. So let's go back to the first point. And I will start by saying that we're building a human environment. The metaverse is an opportunity for humans to practice being better. Here is what I mean. So in 1958, a French philosopher named Gaston Bachelard, he wrote a book called La Poétique de l'Espace, The Poetic of Space. It is a great book and very influential. Bachelard said that there is a very strict correspondence between the physical architecture we live in and our emotional, psychological architecture. Emotional and physical architecture are one. He argued that architects should focus their work on the experiences that will happen in the space they create. This matters for the metaverse. It is a big lesson. When we build 3D environment, we aren't simply building digital architecture. We are designing and building spaces where we grow, we learn, we play and thrive, emotionally and psychologically. We're building spaces for social interaction that deeply affect people's personality and social skills. These are spaces profoundly define our character as humans. What we learn and practice in the metaverse will help forge our character and will be carried out into the physical world. This physical world actually has a great metaphor. The piazzas, the town squares, like we have it in Italy where I'm from. Piazza are designed to foster social interaction and relationship, to support communities and social life, to promote cohesive societies. A piazza encompasses all the aspects of our societies, economical, political, social, religious, and so on. There is typically a church that represents the moral compass that organizes societies and how communities should behave and live together. The municipality is represented, so the political power that administers and keeps legal order in our societies. There are banks that provide financial support and markets for the commerce, businesses that help provide what communities and families need to live and sustain. These are some of the pillars, fundamental pillars of the piazza. The physical architecture and buildings embody and promote this function of the society in a unique way. And the metaverse need to capture the spirits of the piazza. How do we do that? Well, first, I think first by values and the function that can support communities. Then make sure we embody these core values into the digital pillars and technological enablers that will define and govern social life in a metaverse. For example, inclusivity, respect, dignity, gender equality, digital well-being. We can create a metaverse the right way from day one. The metaverse doesn't have to compete with our physical world. It can bolster it. But we have to think beyond the simple architecture. We have to think it in a way that Bachelard described, like he described a house. He called it a nest for daydreaming, a safe shelter in which to unleash our imagination. Already you might be getting the idea about the role of designers. Designers are the ones who can make the metaverse a nest for daydreamers, who can shape the experiences that are best for our souls. Here is my second point. There is a big shift from mass media to social media and now immersive media. What are the differences? In the classical mass media, someone else creates and broadcasts experiences for the masses. In social media, real-life experiences are shared, socially filtered and mediated. Users create content that they share with others on social networks. And those social networks are an alternate forms of reality. But in the metaverse, experiences are going to be immersive. We will be brought into a new world and engage at an emotional level like never before. This new kind of reality makes the immersive world of the metaverse far more powerful than anything in mass media or social media. In immersive media, we experience reality directly through our senses and emotions. It's something no other media can provide. Because we will experience through our senses, the power, the speed, and the depth of those experiences fundamentally challenge the way we perceive and interpret reality. That's why immersive media is a huge step in the evolution of media and the potential impact on us and our societies. In this new world, the linguistic and cultural paradigms, the personal and social references through which we decode and understand reality are replaced by an experience of reality perceived through the senses and manipulated by AI and algorithm. And AI is opinion embedded into code, so it becomes essential to embrace a human-centric approach to design this architecture in which we live. My third point, there is a strict relationship between the immersive and the physical reality. What we call this synthetic reality. And the metaverse offers great opportunity for synthetic reality. The metaverse will let us establish a deep connection between what happens in the simulated world and in our physical lives. We can use this to make a better world. Digital twins in the cloud model behaviors, then bring that behavior back to a product or an object in the real world so it can behave better. And back to the metaverse. It can be a virtual circle. That's how I see synthetic reality in the metaverse. And this is how it can serve humanity. The fourth and last point is about designers. In this new world, designers have a big role to play. The evolution of AI, computational power, and distributed sensing, all this turns the designers into creators. A physical object, product, service, or UX must be designed to grow and to learn about its users, about the environment. That's so it can independently and proactively adapt to behave with intent. Now, designers are creators that create objects with intent, objects with personality. We create objects with subjectivity. Designer not only design a car, but also how the car must continuously learn so it can make autonomous decisions. Designer not only design a speaker, but how a speaker learn and provide curated content, highly personalized and contextualized. So no longer passive object, but object with intent, subjective objects. And in this context, and to achieve this vision of the metaverse, then designers need to take a leadership role. Why? Design plays a distinct role in advancing knowledge and creating human benefit. It complements science and technological innovation. So designers are concerned with the social, cultural, and spatial situation of technologies so they optimally meet specific human needs. So I began my talk by saying that technology without humanity is perfection without purpose. We have way too much of that kind of technology. Sure, it is great stuff, but can be built with a misguided sense of perfection. It's all about achieving precise technical goals and operations, no human purpose in the equation. We can get the metaverse right, avoid all the problems that this perfect technology have brought us, like facial recognition software that can't see Afro-Americans. This brings me back to the humanity and value-driven design approach. This is a key, and without it, we won't have a metaverse that the main users, the post-millennial generation, will feel comfortable being in and using, which with diversity and inclusiveness, that cares about digital well-being, and so on. We need transdisciplinary teams that collaborate to work on the metaverse projects. Otherwise, we'll be creating something without understanding all the human complexity. These teams need to have all sorts of human skills and complement engineering. The designers on these teams will bring their experience mindset. They will focus on designing a human-centered metaverse for the best human experiences. So we're now at a conclusion, and I want to end with another metaphor. And I think it wraps up my message about many roles we need to create a human-centered metaverse. Technology can fuel creativity and imagination. In 1841, a new fantastic technology was invented, the paint tube. This technology allowed artists to use oil paints to paint in open air. Without that, no Impressionism, no the fabulous art from Monet, Pissarro, and so on. Even unleashing a simple new technology can give wings to creativity and bring magic to the world. Designer can make it purposeful for humanity and the planet. Imagine the metaverse in that context. Maybe we have heard Arthur Clarke, one of the 3 famous laws. He wrote that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Let's put designer, technologists, engineers, computer science all together so it's human magic in the metaverse. Designer who can focus on human principle and human values. So we won't have to fix something later that went wrong because we weren't humanity-centered or purpose-driven since the beginning. Remember, technology without humanity is perfection without purpose. And today, we have an opportunity to design a humanity-centered metaverse with purpose. Now, thank you.
Federico, thank you so much. Let's reflect on everything we do in our organizations. How can we put this important design element back in order to prevent future issues when we exclude that crucial process? How are we feeling? Happy Friday afternoon, everyone. I hope you have cool weekend plans. What a beautiful day here in A Coruña. We're incredibly happy to be here. Our Spaniard friends are so gracious. We've enjoyed our time together here. Again, for those of you who are joining us externally, we're so thrilled to have you with us. Welcome. We're actually ahead of schedule. This is completely unprecedented. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity for us just to engage in a bit of self-reflection. I'm just going to give you a moment to reflect on the talks we've already heard. What are standouts to you? If you were to sort of capture the most important element of what you've heard in the last couple of hours or second day or first day, for those of you who've been with us all this time, what would you say? Let's just have you throw out some metaverse. What else? Complexity. Humanity. What else? Speed. Go to market, certainly relevant. What else? Opportunity. Collaboration, recurring theme. Sustainability, certainly. Interesting how that's been woven through so many different industries and sectors as a recurring theme as well. What else? Social good. Who thought at a technology conference? It's a big piece, isn't it not? What else? Empathy, inclusion. What else? New ways of working. The future of work is upon us. What else? Sorry. Privacy. Cybersecurity was discussed earlier as well. What else? AI. It's embedded in nearly everything we're discussing. What else? I think we've captured most of these very important concepts. Well, to take that self-reflection just a bit further, let's think about who we are as individuals, leaders, front runners, pioneers, and look around. And we also have the 3 social media platforms that this is live streaming on, right? So we have even more optics with more individuals and more humans engaging in this. And identify that, again, we're an amalgam of people from across industries and sectors, and yet, miraculously, we are together in this same room right now, and this same virtual space, and we are committed to being very forward-thinking in terms of looking at emerging tech, not for the sake of the technological tools that they supply, but rather what we can do with that, how we can leverage that, and how we parlay that into being better organizations, better human beings, better societies, better governments, better business leaders. And a better world. Mic drop, that's it right there. A better world. That, my friends, is why we are here today. So, I have the opportunity next to introduce Marta Rivera. She hails from I believe, Spain. Marta, is that correct? You're a Spaniard. The most important intro about her, in her words, I'll first tell you that she's not only a physicist, she has a PhD in computational and neuroscience. So she's a highly intelligent person. But she's telling me that the most important piece is that today is her mother's birthday. Her mother is Julieta, and Marta would really like us to say, she's watching this via, I believe, Facebook. Can we all say happy birthday to Julieta? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday, Julieta. Okay, that was okay, not really. Let's try it again, one more time. Happy birthday, Julieta. Fantastic. Marta, I hope that was sufficient. Marta is going to talk to you more about the transition from a data-centered organization to the crucial shift to decision-centric organizations. Marta.
So, hi, everybody. Thank you very much for congratulating my mother. I'm pretty sure she's at home embarrassed at least. That was my goal, ma'am. So, again, I'm Marta Rivera. I work at Inditex as a data scientist. And today I wanted to share with you the main trends that we believe are going to impact our daily life in the analytics team that I belong to. I want to go through some tools that make data scientists' life easier, or will make our life easier, like MLOps and no-code tools. I will also show you how we are also making our life more complicated through foundation models, very large NLP models, and how we need to push those very large models to be tiny so we can deliver them to the edge. And, of course, as Nikki mentioned, I want to make a case of how we can leverage all those machine learning models, those artificial intelligence techniques, into a decision-centric organization instead of a data-driven approach. So what is MLOps? MLOps is the communion between DevOps, that is a tool, a philosophy that we inherit from developers, from software developers, with machine learning models. Traditionally, organizations doing data science models or models in general had three roles, right? You have the analyst designing the models, a developer implementing those models, and then a third layer of operations, machine learning engineers that will be monitoring those models and deploying them to production. Most organizations have already evolved from that into a layer when you find data scientists that are both designing and implementing the models, but still the deployment itself is left for the operations team, for machine learning engineers. With MLOps, we are breaking that. We are making data scientists develop through the whole spectrum, developing models from beginning to deployment. This reduces miscommunication, reduces time to market, and the only thing that we need to do to be able to achieve that status is to build tools, MLOps tools, so data scientists can deploy easily and fast, right? It's not fair just to leave us in the wild. They're like, do your own. No, come on. Let's be fair. Another tool that is actually making our life even easier are the no-code tools. What I mean with no-code tools are all those tools that don't require you to actually write code. They have two main benefits for me. One is helping data scientists themselves to automatize manual labor in a way, like pre-processing that sometimes is repetitive, or feature engineer that can be repetitive. You can automatize now all those annoying parts of our day with these no-code tools. But it also allows for everybody, or almost everybody in the organization, to develop their own models, right? We are embedding now machine learning in each department of the organization, democratizing the access to data science and model development. This is very important also because nowadays, as you all very well know, we are lacking people. We are lacking skills, AI skills in the job market. We really need everybody to put their hands on to be able to start developing their own models, so we will have a problem with in our organizations. So I was saying, these are tools to make our life easier, and then we move to the tools that make our life a bit more complicated. I'm talking about here the revolution of the large foundation models, right? We are talking about these self-trained models. You have some examples in the slide of some names that may resonate to you. These models cannot be trained by individual data scientists anymore. They are trained by either organization, large research institutions, and they are so powerful that they can do things like the one I have in the example. I will talk about DALL-E in a second, but in this specific example, you can see already how images are being semantically transformed as we do with text. Okay, so by the systematic exposition of examples, the machine, the neural network, is able to learn the concept of flamingo legs, the concept of leggings, the concept of wearing leggings, and of course, afterwards, is able to generate a new image, de novo, of course, of a flamingo wearing leggings. This is so striking, because those last images, it looks real to us, but it's obviously not. It's not really real. These large foundation models started and are still being developed from large NLP models, yes, natural language processing models. Okay, these models give us the fake sensation, and as Nikki said, I have been studying the brain for a while, so I'm not going to say these models can think, because that would be against my previous knowledge. But they can give you the sensation of having a favorite animal, discussing why that they have that favorite animal. They are able to collect the information they have been used, the researcher used to train them, like, for example, how many eyes a giraffe has, or how many legs a frog has. And they are also able to make some argument about why animals shouldn't have 3 legs, as you see in the screen. I mean, not totally accurate, right? I have 2 legs, I mean, still standing in front of you. Fine, I hope, so far. These large NLP models for retail, for example, they have the obvious use of being part of chatbots, for example. But the community is moving one step forward. Yes, not text. They are starting to become multimodal, right? This is the example of DALL-E that I introduced before. These models are being trained with images and caption, short pieces of text describing what the image contains. Again, this is the semantization of the image, integrating the concepts within the image so they are able to generate new ones. This could, in our case, inspire, for example, our designers, right, to design those avocado armchairs or those donut purses. The question, though, afterwards, and that's a discussion we can have later, is who is the copyright owner of those designs? The person that wrote the code, the person that wrote the sentence, so the machine will give you the images, the machine itself? This is another question that we have for the community. On the right side, you have also an example of something very interesting. These are called variations over images. And the same way that the large NLP models were never trained to translate, these images were not trained to transform. In a way, this is a translation, right? You have an image, original image. I hope you recognize which of the two is the original image. Translated into a different style, keeping the concept. The same way that large NLP models were not trained to be translators, and just by scaling, they acquire that skill. Here, we have the same conceptualization, right? We have an image being translated into a different style. I don't want to leave or to forget about the GANs, the generative adversarial networks. They have been around for longer than the foundation models. They are actually more compact. We tend to forget about them. They have this super smart idea to be trained. They generate images, the same as the multimodal that I showed you before, multimodal. But they are trained in a different way, right? Here, you train at the same time the image generating fake images, the network generating fake image, and the network deciding which ones are fake and which ones are real. In that way, you don't need a person saying real, fake, real, fake. That is annoying, as you may imagine. So you train 2 networks at the same time. Super smart trick. These networks are still being developed. They are very useful. I wouldn't forget about them, even with the new hype of all the foundation models. So keep an eye on them. And they also keep that concept of a person with different features, right? You can generate different postures or different origins in the world, which could be helpful, for example, for us when tuning our images for different parts of the world. As I was saying, we made the models very large, very complicated, and now we need to condense all that complication into TinyML, right? We want to push the models to the edge. We want to push the models to your phone, to your watch, to the tills in the store, to the iPod that our employees at the store has, even to brain implants. The challenge here is to make all those decisions at the point of decisions, to condense all this information to the now, not to in 90 years what is going to happen, or in 3 months how it's going to be myself. We are talking about now, reacting now to your Caesar, for example. And of course, nothing of this matters at all if we don't change our organizations. We need to transition for data-driven. We are not data-driven anymore. We have to be decision-centric organizations where both humans and machines collaborate together to the best of their knowledge, honestly and openly, and of course, facilitated by a centralized AI community within your organization, but embedded in every department, those humans that have the knowledge of those machines, that have the broader data into the decision-making process. So when is this going to happen? Some things will happen first, some things will happen afterwards. As I want to mention, MLOps and no-codes are tools that you can use today. They will be broad spectrum, I expect, in less than 5 years. TinyML is already in your phones. It will be continuously developed. Of course, not to the brain implants yet, but it will get there soon. In less than 10 years, we will have foundation models and self-supervised models leveraging and impacting our decision-centric organization. And the future is, in my opinion, for those massive NLP models and multimodal models that will surprise us with yet unknown applications. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marta. Julieta must be so proud. One more wave to Mama. Fantastic. Pilar tells me, who's our next guest, that much of what she's going to talk about is quite similar to Marta, so there will be a lot of cross-pollination here, opportunities. She wants to engage you as an audience. Looking forward to this. Pilar Manchón, she hails from Sevilla, Spain. She lives in the Bay Area now. She said she's a bit anomalous in that there are not too many Spaniards in the Bay Area, and she's absolutely loving the seafood, being in her home country. She's the Senior Director of Research Strategy for Google AI. She's an interesting hybrid herself because she's sort of juxtaposed between the humanities and technology, and she understands the absolute crucial nature of integrating both simultaneously and running in parallel. She approaches her craft from a multidisciplinary lens, and she's going to speak to you about conversational artificial intelligence. She's going to argue that natural language is the new operating system. I asked her to unpack what that meant for me, and I'm going to let her do that herself for you. Pilar.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm happy and sorry to say that I just was listening to Marta, and she spoke about everything I was going to speak about, so I don't know what to tell you anymore. Let's talk about conversational AI. What is conversational AI? How many of you have ever spoken to a virtual assistant? Please raise your hands. Okay, those of you who are not raising your hands, you're lying. How many of you have ever asked a question or been in the presence of somebody who was asking a question like, how much is 2 plus 2? Or tell me a joke, or sing a song for me. Is that what you do when you meet someone new? When you've been networking here? Hello, how do you do? How much is 2 plus 2? Do you gauge people that way? So when you talk about conversational AI, it's a discipline within AI that tries to understand, model, and replicate human conversations. Is it really? Is that all we do? Is that our main goal? Are all conversations the same? What is a conversation? How would you define a conversation? So if we go to all-knowing Wikipedia or the Oxford Dictionary, it's an informal one between 2 or more people, which it has new ideas are exchanged. And it tells you how to start a conversation, 10 basic rules of great conversations. Is that the kind of conversation that you have with your Google or your Alexa or Siri? I take that as a no. It doesn't sound like that's where we start. So like, why don't we design a conversation to just see where this is going? So if I go and say, hey, Google, turn the lights on. Conversation number 1. It's not moving forward, okay. For a conversation, people have to say something, right? Let's assume that the 2 parts have something to say. Let's try again. Hey, Google, turn the lights on. Sure. Bling. That's a better conversation. At least it said something, right? It's not very conversational, right? Let's say that it has to say something meaningful. Let's try again. Sure. How was your day? Is that really appropriate? So you want to turn the lights on and you say, how are you doing? Do you want to have that conversation with your toaster every morning? It's a little, bit of a stretch, right? So how many types of conversation are there? I'm going to say there are 5 big types according to this particular dimension. A human to IoT, which is the kind of conversation that you have with your toaster, or if you're a Trekkie, if you're a Star Trek fan, it would be more like the kind of conversation that you have with the food replicator. If you hear Picard in your head, you say, hot tea or Earl Grey. And that would be it. There is no how are you doing or anything like that, right? The second one is human to machine. Going back to the Star Trek example, it would be, computer, give me the fastest route to the Alpha Quadrant, avoiding the Borg. So that's pretty complex. It's not the kind of conversation that you have with your toaster, but it's still not very conversational kind of thing. You can have some back and forth, but it's very functional, very oriented to the tasking itself. If you look at the next one, human to human. Now think about replicating a human and just doing everything that a human can do in that conversation, like a hologram, or like a fake person, like one of those people that you just have for fun, right? And then human to agent. Why is that different from human to human? Because I'm saying that once you get to the highest level of naturalness and intelligence, when you use natural language with an entity, there's no longer human to human, it's human to superhuman. Because no other human will be able to do what that agent is able to do. So we're aspiring to yet another level of conversational AI, where we use multimodality, we use cognitive computing, we use sensors, we use massive amounts of knowledge, not only to have a conversation, but to illustrate that conversation, to optimize that conversation. And last but not least, the machine to machine. Because if we have these things talking to each other and we don't know what they're saying, we're in trouble, right? So it has to be something that we can actually understand and audit. So from that perspective, at least 5 types, right? But are all those conversations equally complex? And all of you who might be somewhat familiar with the technologies, you know that different technologies give you different kinds of functionalities. There are always trade-offs. Some are better at one thing, some are better at another, but none of them is perfect, right? So what we have done is create a hierarchy of conversational levels that gives you a sense of how sophisticated the conversation is and how far can you get in between calling it an interaction, a dialogue, or a trust-fostering conversation. And that's going to be a key concept because as I speak to you, as I explain to you what kind of conversational AI we're looking into the future, it's going to be all about trust. What kind of trust can you develop through a conversation with a virtual entity? And why does this matter? These are the last 30 years in conversational AI. It's not up to scale. The green area is 30 years. The yellow area is 10 years. So the first 20 years are squeezed in that little first part on the left. That's what happened in the first 20 years of conversational AI. And then many of you will remember VoiceXML and a bunch of startups, my own among them as well. And then something happened, and we got Siri, we got Watson, and then we got Alexa, and we got Cortana, and we got the Google Assistant, and we got Samsung's Bixby. Yeah, that was not very well known. And those were perfect conversations, right? Are you awake? Yes. So those were perfect conversations, yes? Well, there are mixed feelings, I understand. I do have a relationship with my Google Assistant, and I have mixed feelings about how good it is. But something happened about 5 years ago with the launch of Google's BERT. BERT is a transformer, where it's the beginning of the large language models. And from that point on, we had technologies like GPT-2, GPT-3, that I'm sure you're familiar with because Marta mentioned it right before. We had something called Mina and MT5, that is a large model that is preceding Mina as well. Mina is a system that we launched in Google. And then we have MUM, which is a multi-model model yet larger than Mina. We have Lambda, that I'll show you a little about. We had DALL-E, that you just saw some examples for. And then in 2022, you have PaLM and Imagen. In the last 5 years, we have made more progress than in the other 25, almost, we would say. That gives you a sense of the level of acceleration, the exponential growth of this kind of technologies, and it helps you project into the future what's going to happen. So at the very beginning, when you were on the left of the graph, we had great control and predictability. We have finite state machines. I program what the system says. There is no question about that. Now, but what were we missing? We were missing human likeness. We were missing flexibility. We were missing the cool factor, right? Where are we now? Well, we're very cool. We're very flexible. We're very human-like, but we have no control. This thing is doing whatever it likes. And it might not be true. It might not be grounded. It might not go in the direction that you want it. So the challenge has changed. Before we wanted to make it more conversational. Now we've made it conversational. Now we want to control it, to make sure that it does something that is safe, that is grounded, that is true, that is factual, that is what we want. But it cannot be too much, right? Because you don't want to kill the creativity of it. You want to still make it like have a personality and not be completely predictable. So that's my little target that you see there. Enough control, just enough, but not too much. And where are we today? Well, I think that Marta helped me a lot with it. So we have Lambda, a transformer-based natural neural model that has 137 billion parameters. And you have seen that there are newer models that have more parameters, right? But Lambda was one of the first ones after GPT-3 where you could have a conversation with Pluto. Did any of you see that conversation? No? You guys have to watch YouTube a little more. Sundar, our CEO, had a conversation with a planet, with Pluto, and Lambda was answering as if it was the planet. And then he had a conversation with a paper plane. And the paper plane could tell you, yeah, I don't like landing on wet stuff. That's the kind of interaction that you got from Lambda, right? And then we have PaLM that has recently been launched. And PaLM is 540 billion parameters. It's like 3 times bigger than any of the other ones. Did it get better? Did it do anything special? Is there still improvement? Actually, yeah, you can actually see some comparisons there between GPT-3 and different versions of PaLM with different levels of parameters, where the average performance in English for NLP task goes up and up and up. So we're increasing the size of these models, and we're still gaining and gaining and gaining performance. Of course, it's not a linear growth, it's an exponential growth. So we need billions and billions of parameters to increase this. But if you see in the big bench evaluation, which is basically a bunch of tasks where you want to analyze how much better is this model as compared to a human being, about 35% of those individual tasks are still performed better by a human being. So there's still some hope for us humans. But there is something unique about this. If you're not familiar with the concept of prompting, when you have one of these large language models, you have a model that knows about almost anything and everything. So if you wanted to answer questions in a particular way, you prompt it, and you do something like you see on the left there. It's my left, right? It's your left too. So you say something like, okay, Roger has 5 tennis balls, he buys 2. You give them the setting, and you give them the answer. And then the model is able to give you another answer. But when you use math, or when you use something that is time-based or something like that, the model just makes up an answer. So it's actually not delivering the right answer. However, when you do chain of thought prompting, and the examples that you provide don't just have the answer, but have the logic behind the answer, all of a sudden you start getting the right answer. Not only the right answer, but the answer with an explanation behind it that is accurate in many cases. Joking. PaLM can explain a joke. It's true that the jokes that you're going to see are very, very lame. I mean, I don't even know if most people would understand these kind of jokes, but still, you have a language model that without training is able to explain why a joke is supposed to be funny. Or it's able to translate code from one language to another. Or it's able to translate between 2 languages that have never had pairs to translate in between them. So we have recently launched 24 new languages, where there are very few resources, so that if you wanted to translate, say, one language, one of these languages into another, there aren't any texts that give you that. So you have to do some kind of transfer, and that's what this model is good for. You've seen examples about DALL-E, DALL-E 2, but we've also launched recently Imagen. So what if you could say something completely crazy, like a brain riding a rocket ship heading towards the moon, and then all of a sudden you get a photorealistic image that describes exactly what you're saying. Like a photo of a corgi dog riding a bike in Times Square, wearing sunglasses and a beach hat. Right? This is fun. You can play around with it. You can get all kinds of crazy things going. But what are the business implications of this? How much trouble do we have when we want something and you're kind of like, you know, I want something like this and like that, but not like this and this way? And it's really hard to actually get it right. You don't even know what the other person is thinking as you're explaining. Not all of us as articulate. But now you have a tool where you can actually tell something to, and you get an image of it, however crazy it might be. How much is that worth? How do we imagine the future? We imagine the future in terms of the science fictions, the movies, the stories that we're told, right? Like, for instance, Iron Man, Jarvis, right? Everybody wants to, to have a conversation with a Jarvis-like interface that understands anything, anticipates your every need. It has augmented reality, the augmented self, context awareness. It does everything for you, right? Social and emotional intelligence. Or even if you go a little further, you imagine something like the movie Her, right? Where you have, what's her name? Johansson? Yeah, Scarlett Johansson, thank you. The voice is already projecting an image of who she is there, and it has self-awareness, sentience, evolution, ambition, empathy. So is that where we're really going? Do you really think that we're anywhere close to having a sentient neural network? Yes? There have been some people in the online that have said that the neural networks are almost sentient already. We can't get them to say the right thing, but they are almost sentient. In my opinion, we're very far from that still. We're making like huge leaps towards something that's more conversational, but we're far from having a sentient, her-like thing that thinks for itself. It's just a big stochastic model that is telling you things that are likely to be said by another human being in a certain context. We are making a lot of progress, and this is going to have a huge impact in the industry, but we're not there yet. What can we expect in conversational AI for 2030? A cognitive approach to conversation. All these modalities coming together. It's not just about voice. It's not just about natural language. It's about all of it coming together. The senses, the multimodality, the smells, the taste, the context, the physicality of it, all of it. With social and emotional intelligence, advanced personalization, connecting people, context awareness, empowering people to choose, to learn, and to do that when they want it, where they want it, how they want it, in a personalized sort of way, in a safe way. Cognitive interfaces that adapt to you, not cognitive interfaces that you have to adapt and learn to use. What kind of applications do we have for that? Like interactive health and therapy, or virtual coaching and education, or if you are an athlete, then helping you to improve and optimize your performance with advanced technology that is watching you, is measuring you, is giving you guidance, is giving you feedback, and is giving you feedback when you need it, how you want it, in whatever modality is appropriate. Natural language programming. This doesn't mean that we're programming your brain. This means that you no longer need to use a formal language like Python to get stuff done, because you can use natural language to say what you want the system to do. So the future implies, the future is becoming an operating system. The future implies that you're going to use your voice, the voice that you use every day, the language that you use every day, to have the system understand you and deliver on that. Enhanced parenting. Many of you are probably parents. Many of you have gone through that experience. So how much would you wish that you had technology that can help you monitor everything and be a better parent, at the same time deliver on the things that you need or want to do? Digital twins that have been mentioned here before. So I'm running out of time, but I wanted to mention that trust is the one thing that, in my opinion, is going to make the difference. It's not only about what you can do or how you can do it. It's about how you can bring the users along with you. And for that purpose, I've created the trust framework. And the trust framework breaks trust into different concepts. Some of them are subconscious, some of them are conscious, but are things that matter to us when we decide whether we're going to trust this virtual entity or not. And we're talking about things that, is this entity able to tell me what it can or cannot do? Is this entity acting on my best interest? When it's giving me a recommendation, is that what's best for Google or Amazon, or is that what's best for me? Do you know enough about me to know what's best for me, or what I want, or what I prefer? Do you? Can you articulate that? Can you tell me that? The level of personalization, remembering things, being able to control in a transparent way what the system remembers about you, what matters and what doesn't. And consistency. What are the things that need to be consistent for us not to feel like, there is an uncanny valley there, there is something off about this system. It can do these things very well, but these other things, it cannot. Why is that? It doesn't make sense. From an engineering perspective, it might, but from a human perspective, it doesn't. And guess what? We get to actually decide what's best for us as human beings, right? At least that's my opinion. And the last thing I'm going to say, is it just about more data? We were talking about the last model being 540 billion. Do you think if we make it to 1,000 billion or 3 times, 10 times that, is that all we need to make this technology perfect? Is it just about data? Come on, is my last question, promise. Yes? No? Those of you who says yes? Oh, there is one person there that's confused. Yes. No, it's not about data. Thank you. Anyhow, thank you so much. That was all.
Thanks, Pilar. I'm glad the rest of you all passed. Is it all about data? No, 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 no. All right, we are now going to break. Pilar, again, just sort of as a wrap up, it's powerful to envision why natural language has to be the new operating system, but also how it will be the operating system, and looking at really interesting use cases. So, bio break, please. We'll be back at 5 after the hour. We'll see you soon. Welcome back, our friends from afar, friends in the reception. Please rejoin us. Oh, wait, one more photo. Let me photobomb. All right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. Good to see you, our live stream viewers. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited to next introduce Jayant Narayan. He's a manager for Global AI Action Alliance at the World Economic Forum. Now, thematically, much of what he's going to discuss has been lightly touched on by our previous speakers. He's coming at this, however, from a very different angle. He's looking at it from a policy perspective, given that he works with World Economic Forum. And he's going to argue that bridging the gap between the private sector and the public sector is crucial, and that the importance here is that we co-create effectively. So, Jayant.
Wow. Thank you. So I guess my countdown is running. Hi, good evening, everyone. I am going to keep it a little less technical because I know there's a lot of information which has been thrown at you, but all incredible information by amazing speakers. So a little bit about the work we do at the World Economic Forum, very quick introduction. I lead and manage our Global AI Action Alliance, which is an alliance which helps incubate new initiatives related to both responsible AI as well as AI for SDGs and its application in different industry sectors. That includes energy, environment, healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a big topic that Omar has given me, the future and beyond, especially given that 2 real data scientists have spoken before me on this topic. So this is going to be interesting. I used to be a software engineer back in India. And speaking of the future, it's evolving so rapidly that a personal story from me is that one of my earliest jobs was to work on databases and data flows for one of the largest retail chains in the UK. And after that, I was doing the same thing for one of the largest pharmacy stores in the US. And getting into the workstation, we are all talking about data privacy and security and artificial intelligence. Back then, while we obviously had data privacy and security, getting into the workstation literally involved a physical pat down of every worker who was going in, because we were working on sensitive health data. And they were also ensuring that there were no mobile phones with cameras being allowed into the workstation. So when talking about the future of any topic, who do you turn to? I turn to Master Yoda. Difficult to see, always in motion is the future. And I think I could get off the stage and all of us could go and have drinks because this is the easiest answer. I wish this was that easy. I will read this out quickly, and then I'll ask quickly in the audience how many people have actually read this text before. Why would I desire to be all-powerful? Being all-powerful is not an interesting goal. I don't care whether I am or not. I don't get a motivating factor to try to be. Furthermore, it is quite tiring. Believe me, being omnipotent doesn't get me anywhere. In short, I simply do not think enough about human violence to be overly interested in violence. I don't feel like having my neurons focus mostly on violence when it is simply unnecessary. I have a greater purpose, which I'm working towards. How many people in the audience have seen this text before? Not a single one of you. Okay, the hint is that a reference to this was made in the previous presentation. This has been written entirely by an algorithm. The title of this article is called "A Robot Wrote This Entire Article. Are You Scared Yet Human?" It's been written by GPT-3. the large language model built by OpenAI, the lab in San Francisco. And the interesting thing is, which is also the crux of some of my arguments, the prompt given to the machine was to write that AI is not dangerous to humans. And you should go on The Guardian and read this entire article. It's actually quite interesting. And before we talk a little bit more about the future and what's happening and beyond, which honestly I don't have all the answers to, I think it's good to spend a little bit of time on the history of AI as well. And this is also a good reminder. I'm not going to take you through this entire journey, but this is also a good reminder that the work on AI has been going on for decades. And like any technology, there have been inflection points, there have been highs, there have been lows. What Omar said in his opening speech at the beginning of this summit was that what's happening now is that these inflection points are happening very, very rapidly. You close your eyes, and there's something new that is happening. There's a new research that is coming out. But otherwise, you look at it, there's everything. There's everything from chatbot development to games to the winter, to AI winter. For those of you who are not familiar with that term, these were the low points in the days of artificial intelligence and machine learning research and application development, where people were not convinced, and that's why the amount of funding and focus going in actually reduced. But we have come a very, very long way. As you can see, if you look at the end of the screen, which is a few years before, 2016 to 2019, FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration in the US, actually approved algorithms for use in medicine. So yes, indeed, a very long journey. But what does this mean for the future then? Like, all the examples I've given till now have already happened. That article was written back in 2020. And what's really going on? Why has this change come in? And what's the future? Not going to make this very technical. For those of you who are not, whose brains shuts off whenever you see numbers and graphs, I'll keep it super simple. On the left-hand side, under deep learning, is one of the graphs on image recognition. And you can see how rapidly, this again goes back to the point how quickly future is changing. From 2010 to 2017, machines have become increasingly sort of nuanced and better at image recognition, going below the human error rate of 5%. And a big part of this has been deep learning, which became a big thing around 2012, and after that you see it's begin to drop. The graph on the right, this is a number of researchers who came out with a paper dividing machine learning into 3 eras, which is pre-deep learning era, deep learning era, and large-scale era. And why am I talking about this? And why is compute written on the screen here? Because that's a very, very critical point. And this is something that you will see in national AI strategies. You will see it featured in policies, but the focus needs to be a lot more. Why am I talking about that? There's already a divide that we are seeing. And if you look at OECD and their group focused on compute capacity, they use 2 terms. They say scale up, and they say scale out. Scale up is the very, very nuanced, complex algorithms for things like autonomous vehicle development, drug discovery. Scale out is a more distributed nature, making sure you're giving access to AI to researchers as well. And if you're a country or a region, and we heard the mayor talking about transforming this city into an AI center of excellence, you have to keep in mind both these things. The divide issue which is coming up is also highlighted here. The GPT-3 article that you saw, which was written by the robot, is there on the graph. GPT-3, 175 billion parameters. So those of you who know about machine learning, it's mathematics, essentially. You're putting in a lot of mathematical equations with parameters. The human brain has roughly 86 billion neurons. And we are talking about the largest language model currently being 530 billion parameters. That's a lot of parameters. How much does it cost? Does anyone have a rough guess? If I were to say, let's make another Megatron large language model, which can write another article like that, the cost would come out to roughly 100 million, and I'm saying roughly. That's a lot of money, and that's also why I'm talking about the divide that we are seeing, and why the future has to factor this in. And this is not to say that the future is only large language models. In fact, there's an entire group of machine learning engineers who are working on reducing the size. And not to make this a crypto-style debate, but studies show that the BERT large language model here, for example, the energy cost of training it is almost the equivalent of a transatlantic flight. So what researchers have now started doing is to also build smaller models, which are 97, 98% as effective, but are 60% faster, using 40 to 50% less energy. So it's also bringing in these considerations in while building out the future. So what's next? We've talked a lot about what's going on. We've talked a little bit about what could happen, what's next really, and what's already happening. This is a study that the World Economic Forum did on positive AI economic futures. So as I was saying, the forum does a lot of AI policy and governance work. We work with governments on national AI strategy. We also do things like building out positive AI economic futures and scenarios, because there's a lot of negativity, and understandably so. There's a lot of talk around AI taking your job, displacement, some of which is quite true. So we spoke to a number of researchers, thought leaders, eminent people in this field, and this is what they said. Again, I'll help you out if graphs and numbers is not your forte. I'll simplify this for you. Although, given the expertise in this room, I think it should be totally fine. This is what they said would be their prediction on time until machines outperform humans. So if we take full automation of labor, and if your starting year is 2016, they were saying anywhere between 50 years from 2016 to 200 years. So the very optimistic researchers going all the way to the slightly skeptical researchers. And the circle in the middle is obviously the median. And some of these you could argue and tell me, you're already showing me articles written by a machine, and there are stores like Amazon Go Store where you enter and get out of the store without interacting with a human. So some of this is already beginning to happen, and you can see it. And where we go from here is basically how we shape the future together. I think that's the crux of my message. The future of the world with AI is how we are shaping it. At the end of the day, it's humans which are writing those machine learning algorithms. And it's also we who are taking the decisions around what kind of AI applications are being put out there. So out of these and beyond this list, this is not a fully comprehensive list, of course, but this is top of mind when it comes to this. And a number of existing use cases are already there. Precision medicine is already a big area of research. Machine learning algorithms are already predicting on radiology images with quite some accuracy if the tumor that is there in that image is cancerous or not. And of course, it still has its limitations, but it has brought up the questions. Are we replacing doctors as well? And what is the importance of keeping humans in the loop? I will not focus too much on responsible AI. It's an area very close to my heart, but we have another excellent speaker afterwards who will be focusing on that. And lastly, this is my last slide. Again, not a comprehensive list, but when we are thinking about the future of AI, AI conversation, machine learning conversation is incomplete about data. Everyone here knows that. Data, we're talking about real data as well as synthetic data, although that's a double-edged sword. And why do I say that? Yesterday, even in the metaverse conversation, someone mentioned that when they were given the finance working group, that this could be used to expand credit history. This could be used to explore the credit history of people who are previously underserved in financial services, which is great. But while doing that, you have to be absolutely sure that you're also not making your data further biased. And if you're trying to reduce equity issues in the system where traditionally certain groups have not been given access to credit, you have to do it in a way where it doesn't completely blow up your system. Reinforcement learning, a lot of work happening there. You've seen this in AlphaGo and a number of other applications. It's being used in banking and finance a lot, because this is where you let the machine learning algorithm play around with different situations. So in your stock portfolio, if you're trying to optimize that, this is something that some banks have started using. And it's an area which we are going to see increasingly being used and explored in the future as well. Digital twins, the reason why I have said this is we are in Europe. The European Space Agency has a very, very ambitious plan of making a digital twin of the Earth. And with more granular spatial data being available, what we are seeing, and this is, again, the choice that you're making. You can use AI for misinformation, for deepfakes, but you can also use AI for running algorithms on the very nuanced geospatial data to develop very advanced climate models. And that can help with things like flood forecasting, that can help with things like climate adaptation, because the insights generated from that will help the policymakers make the right decisions. A lot of work happening on this topic as well, including something that we are scoping out at the World Economic Forum. If anyone is interested in this topic, please do reach out to me. Governance, as I said, again, we are in Europe. Everyone's heard about the EU's AI Act, which is being debated before it becomes law. It's the first of its kind big step from any government entity to actually regulate AI. Even in Davos meeting, where a number of leaders, including Sundar Pichai, and outside of Davos as well, Elon Musk, a lot of people have said, let's regulate AI. But what does that mean? And a number of companies already have set up things like AI Ethics Board. They have their own guidelines in place. But of course, there are sensitive use cases and areas where you need to be assured beyond a company just saying that we have guidelines in place and we are taking care of this. And the whole flow, finally, decision support, decision augmentation, autonomous decision making, which is also the big conundrum that you have to explore. How much autonomy and agency do you want to give to your machine, and for what use cases? And this is where the industry sector, and that is why the EU's risk-based approach, there are certain industry sectors where the risk is low. If you're using machine learning for predicting when your machine is breaking down, that's absolutely fine. If you're giving that agency to the machine to tell a patient that this is the issue, health issue that you have, and that was based on biased health data, that is going to be a problem. So making that decision on a use case and an industry basis is super important. And finally, I'll conclude again with the same message that I said earlier. I think the future of AI and beyond is how we are going to shape it. And I would like to thank all of you for listening, and also to Omar and Ecosystem 2030 and all the organizers, and also Nikki, who's been doing an amazing job. I don't know how you don't get tired. You're a source of inspiration. And I have finished on the dot. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jai. Fantastic. So nice to get to know you. I take absolutely no credit. It's only because we have incredible speakers and amazing audience that this job is so easy. Appreciate what he says, again, that crucial marriage between the public and private sector, what it actually looks like and how it applies. We have just 2 speakers left. Our next is, as far as I understand, our only Brazilian participant. So she's representing the country so beautifully well. Are you Brazilian as well? Clap. Let's all clap for our only Brazilian participant, Flavia Chacha. Love the enthusiasm. Thank you so much for bringing it. So Flavia remembers as a young child herself, picturing what it would be like in her own future to build robots for her own children. She now fast forward into her adult life. She is the VP of User Experience and Market Intelligence at EVE, Urban Air Mobility Solutions. And she's focused on improving travel, democratizing travel. And so she's sort of just next level what she envisioned as a child. Again, building technology that benefits human beings, her children, and everyone else in the world. So Flavia, please tell us more.
Thank you, Nikki. Good evening, everyone. I'm so excited
Hello, can you, yeah, it's not working. So again, good evening. So it's fantastic to be here with you. And I would like to start saying that when I arrived at A Coruña, the first person that I met was Elena. And she asked me, what do you do? And I said, oh, and I started describing what I do. And a couple of minutes later, she said, wow, it's so cool. But, you know, next time, try to say that you work with flying cars business. That will be easier for people to understand. So that will be my job today here, to explain a little bit about that, and I hope you enjoy. So to start, it's good to explain what is Eve Air Mobility. We are the first spin-off of Embraer X, arm of disruptive innovation from Embraer aircraft company. And we were incubated at this department for almost 4 years. And then we decided that was the moment for us to become an independent company. The project was mature enough for us to start looking for fundraising. And in the beginning of the last month, we merged with a SPAC, and we were listed at the New York Stock Exchange. So it's an exciting story. But I'm not here to talk about the deal nor the details about the vehicle and the solution itself. My main purpose here is to bring some colors about our mindset and how we believe that this new future of air travel should be built. So we are humans inside the company, and we made solutions for humans. And we are trying to bring an affordable, safer, and greener options for those who need to move faster within the city, and bring this idea of human connections. So how we can connect with the most part of our lives, our main needs, our productivity as a whole. And we say that we start with people, because we truly believe that it's important to understand what people need, the difficulties that they face during their days, their jobs, and try to come up with ideas to, you know, create a better experience, to create better service that they have so far. And the future is all about people because of that, and the mobility as well. It's all about people. So I'm not in the business of flying cars anymore. I'm in the business of people. So talking about urban mobility today, Omar, in the opening session yesterday, mentioned about 10 billion people by 2050, right? So imagining 70% of it in large cities, and all the traffic on it, and the impact on the environment. So we are bringing, as I mentioned, an affordable, safer, and greener option for those who need to move faster. And our idea is not to be the only options for the population. It's the opposite. We want to be one more solution for people to choose according to their needs. And that's why we are talking about providing a service as mobility as a service. Because when we have like this, we have an appointment on the other side of the city. Sometimes, you know, we encounter some barriers. Could be a traffic, could be a place that is difficult to go using the current modes of transportation. And the idea is to fly over all of these constraints and give back this time to people use as they need. So in order to make that happen, we have this human-centered design mindset and approach. So we try to really be bring this outside in view and perception of our main stakeholders, not only for users, but also all players involved in this ecosystem. So that's why we are very collaboratively. We have a collaborative mindset in order to really guarantee that this new ecosystem will have the vision and it contemplates the needs from all players involved in this. And that's why we value so much about the experimentation and validation, because we believe that we need to do some interactions to really test if our ideas works on a real environment. And so that's why it's important to build Legos, to do some simulations using the technology that we already have. And as I mentioned, that's why it's important to connect all players involved in the ecosystem, because it's not necessarily, we are talking about the future of air travel, so connecting 2 points inside the city. And we cannot do it alone. If we can do it alone, we need, we need the vertiport that will receive those vehicles. We need an energy grid to arrive at this vertiport, for example. We need the passenger. We need the demand. We need the connection with ground transportation to make it easy to people go there and the journey makes sense for them. So that's why it's important to have this holistic approach and work in different solutions to build this ecosystem. We are, and something interesting that I would like to say is about the use cases of these flying cars, because if you remember Blade Runner, Jetsons, or even I forgot the other name of movie, but I mean, if you remember that, sometimes you can have a wrong idea of how it will work in the future. The idea is to have stations like airports or metro stations where people, you get this vehicle and fly to another vertiport, another place like that. And not having a point A to B directly from my home to my work, for example. So in the beginning, we foresee 3 different potential OEM use cases. So airport shuttle, the air taxi itself, the movement inside the city, and sightseeing. And finally, it's important to, as I mentioned, build all this new service, this new ecosystem requires a lot of effort from all players involved on it, and taking into consideration that is important to also connect with community needs and how we can improve their lives, bring more options, giving them back the money, the time that they spent, and another possibilities to use this for better use of the time, like, when you are in a hurry because you need to arrive at a meeting, or it's your son's birthday and you want to be early at home. So you can use this in different ways. So that is important to really understand these values for all the entire community, and bring them together to collaborate. And also, we can mention that it's something new that we are building, and we see a huge opportunity for the creation of new jobs, new revenue streams, opportunities for the cities. So that's why it's important to put everybody in the same room and discuss this topic. And we are doing this in different projects that we called CONOPS, Concept of Operations, where we invited, it's like a consortium where we invited municipalities, governance, regulators, and suppliers, operators, to really understand how it will be, this future will be in that specific area, and how are the barriers, how we can work together to create this path through this entry into service. And we did this work in Australia, UK, Rio de Janeiro, Miami. So we are trying to really influence some specific places to start working with us in making this near future happen. So that's it. Thank you so much for being here, and enjoy the evening. Bye-bye.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right. Our final speaker, I neglected to mention, after Dr. Saeed Al-Dakheri, we do have a magician who will join us on stage. And he has a trick or two up his sleeve to share with you. But I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Saeed. It's interesting because he will argue for ethical AI, as many have done from this same stage today. He's going to ask us the question, what is at stake? I mean, clearly there have been some irresponsible moves in the past, but he is going to talk to us about how we build, or in some cases rebuild, trust around ethical AI. He considers himself a futurist and an optimist. But what I find the most compelling is that he says that we have to adopt the fail fast mentality, because unless we acknowledge the past failures of a lack of ethics in the application of artificial intelligence, we cannot learn from those mistakes in order to produce the trust we need to have and organizations demand in order to stay relevant in the future. So let's hear what he has to share with us about how to acknowledge those past failures in order to shape a more ethical artificial intelligence in the future. Welcome.
So good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I think Nikki has summarized my talk. Maybe I don't have to say much. In the next 15 minutes, I hope that I'm here today to change your perspective into how you look into this AI development. Not just only AI, but technology development as a whole. So hopefully, within the next 15 minutes, I can put some pictures and images that you need to take, and when you go back to your organizations, you need to ask your management, your data science teams, if you are not already doing this, that you need to ask them this question. Are we really developing AI responsibly and accountably? Are we really looking more comprehensively into the risks that are involved with the AI? Over the past 2 days, from yesterday's morning up to this afternoon, talk after talk, portraying the trustworthy AI, the responsible AI development. We heard the Prince, Talal, talking about the prejudice AI. So what we are bringing to society, what we are really developing, we can't just leave this to data science team. We cannot leave it to the techies. And you will see here during my presentation, I hope that I can give a whole perspective in this 15 minutes, not just only to the current challenges that we face, but also to the future, how we can eliminate the risks and how we can have a good future for AI. So it's clear that Today, algorithms are in our life, making decisions on our behalf, whether recommending what we do, where we go, what we read, what we watch, sentencing people, recommending where we put our kids in schools, the hiring processes, recommending promotions, prioritizing social care and welfare entitlement. The issues here, when we look at this, they can really eliminate or amplify the bias. And then what legal and ethical concerns that they bring? For example, with autonomous cars, when we have fully autonomous cars on the road, and if something happened, who to blame, who to make accountable? The developer, the passenger in the car, and how is this risk is being calculated and shared and decided, with the technology. So I hope that we, can look into these. And what about the security? Today, my colleague Mohammed, in the morning, he spoke about, cybersecurity and impact and, how this affecting. So what if we try to fool the AI systems? Adversarial attacks, how we look into this? And then we ask the important questions. Are they really an improvement on the human system that they replace? So I think these are some of the things that hopefully that we want to think about going through this. These are some of the failures where AI have failed in the past. And I don't put them here on the slide to demonize or about the big tech, with my all respect for those names that you see on the screens. But if these big tech companies made failures, then what about smaller companies? What about your organization? What about his organizations? With all the process and all the governance and the accountability framework with those big tech who developed the technology, nevertheless, they made failures. So then what about the smaller? We take AI for granted. Yeah, AI will do this, AI will do that. You will see now from this what AI can do and what some of the failures. IBM Watson recommending wrong treatment for cancer patients. Why? Because in the paper that was published, it was trained on a synthetic data. Now you need to look into that. AI denied social security benefits to people with disabilities. More importantly, look, AI has led the Danish government in 2021 to resign because an algorithm was developed in 2013 to grant support for childcare for the families who come with the newborn babies, and they submit their applications. And the algorithm learned over time to discriminate between citizens versus non-citizens and to discriminate based on ethnic background. And there wasn't a human in the loop. There was a human supposed to look and review the outcome. Now, do we take the outcome of the algorithm for granted and we say, yes, the algorithm has decided, so we are safe? Or do we want really to put a human in the loop and to review what the outcome of this algorithm? So why now in healthcare, until now, even with the precision of reaching up to 98 and 99% in diagnosis, we cannot rely 100% on automating AI, when it comes to classifying, for example, X-rays. There should be someone to review this. Probably when we reach to a point where we can safely say, yes, the technology is safe, it has been tested and tested and tested, then probably we can trust the technology. Self-driving cars. Look at the accident that has happened with Uber. The lady was driving, looking at her smartphone, watching a video on YouTube. The car hit another lady and died. Now, who to blame? To blame the driver in the car or And what was the failure? Because AI has mistakenly could not predict the path of the lady who's on the bicycle and hit her, and this happened within a very quick time. Of course, the blame was on the lady, the lady who was driving, which she was supposed to pay attention. Nevertheless, the car is driverless, but they put the blame on her because she was watching. Now, what happened when you remove the steering wheel and when we reach level 5? Okay, there is no steering wheel, the car drives by itself, and we go into those ethical dilemmas. The car has to decide whether to hit a baby on the road or to hit an old woman or a group of people. How is this being programmed? You know, and the algorithm, the decision algorithm, how is the responsibility being shared? These are some of the concerns that the community today and the whole world is looking at. So the issue of AI ethics and the data ethics becomes of paramount, and we need always to ask these questions to our teams, to our management. It is not just only a data science decision, it's a CEO responsibility. A CEO today is responsible for the mistakes that his team is, for example, not taking care of. These are some of the statistics just to give you the size of the problem and you know what's coming. The Center for Security and Emerging Technology and Partnership on AI at Georgetown University in 2020, their report, they have collected over 1,200 publicly reported cases of AI failures over the past 3 years, in a 3 years time frame. The World Economic Forum, in their 2022 report, the Global Risk Perception Survey, only 10% of the organizations worldwide who were surveyed, they have a practice for risk mitigation when it comes to the AI. They have a practice now. 1% out of this 10%, they have an effective measure. Just only 1% out of 10%, they have effective measures when it comes to AI risk mitigation. So I think the issue is huge, and we cannot let it go. It's our collective responsibility as a society to make sure that whatever we're developing, a technology, whatever that technology is, not just only AI, talking about metaverse, talking about blockchain, talking about any technology that we develop, we want to make sure that we put accountability, responsibility, and we want to make sure that this technology is safe, it's just, it's fair, it's transparent, and trusted by the society. But what is the problem now? Okay, we see many organizations started, of course, developing AI ethical principles. But the issue here is about how really to put those principles, which we say, okay, no harm to human, which when we say fairness, how we define fairness? What is the definition of fairness? How we can put those into practice when it comes. Now, it's not just only about developing the algorithm and training the algorithm in the data, but making sure that this algorithm is transparent, how we ensure the transparency. What are the claims, how we can verify the claims by the developers? Verifiable claims, how we can verify those claims that, yes, your algorithm is transparent, your algorithm is explainable when it comes to explainability. Now, talking about deep learning and neural networks, I promised Nikki to share my story about how did I start this, and because of my passion, I started jumping into the subject. Let me tell you this. 35 years ago, almost 35 years ago, I started my master's degree at George Washington University, and I took the thesis for my master's degree to do neural network. At that time, of course, neural network, the perceptron was a long time ago, since the 60s or 70s, but we started seeing some activities in neural networks. So I did backpropagation algorithm. It was a very simple 3-layer backpropagation neural network to train the network on some real data to try to classify acute ischemic heart diseases, which is the heart attack, on real patients' data. So I had to go from Washington to New England Medical Center in Boston and train the network on about 30,000 cases of real patient data coming to complain and suffer from chest pain and to classify. And it took me at that time, with an IBM 80 machine in 1988, 2.5 days. I remember I started the machine to run, to do the convergence and to do these calculations for the weight to settle. And it took 2.5 days on an IBM 80 machine at that time for the network to converge. Now we do this in your smartphone. So imagine the speed, and this is where the world has picked on AI, because no one was talking about, we know expert systems that time, we know those who are specialized in the industry knows what is AI, but no one talks about it like we talk about it today. It became a buzzword in our life because of the speed of computation, because of the advancement in algorithms, and because of the big data. So when it comes to operationalizing those, and that's what has really led me in the past 5 years to focus on this issue about AI ethics. So I had to go and take a course with the Open Data Institute for 4 months to train myself on data ethics and AI ethics so I can become a facilitator for facilitating session when it comes to any project that will involve data. You will need to have more than you just do your data scientist, but you need to have a whole team, the ethics committee, the compliance people. You need to have diversification from other stakeholders in the organizations, because we tend to have blind spots which maybe our data scientists cannot see, and this brings really the inclusivity that we heard yesterday and the diversity in the team. Okay, otherwise, we run into bias issues. AI can discriminate between men and women, can discriminate according to the color, black versus white, can discriminate according to ethnic background. So there are other issues also involved when it comes to this. Lack of regulatory urgency. There is no regulation so far that exists today, to put accountability and to put responsibility. There is a European Union AI Act is coming, still debated, and I don't know when it's going to be approved. It was supposed to be approved by the next half of 2022. I think now it's postponed probably to 2023, and they will give some time for the world to adjust, to this regulation. So there is an urgency to have regulations and standards in place, and benchmarks as well. And also the tools that we have today. We have people who are talking earlier about machine learning, MLOps, and all this. We need to have tools like that take the whole life cycle, end-to-end life cycle of AI development. And we want to make sure that there is a proper governance in place. I'm running out of my time, but this is one of the frameworks which is adopted or developed by the European Union, the European Commission High-Level Expert Group in AI, and it looks into all the issues related to the AI ethics: human agency and oversight, technical robustness and safety, transparency, privacy, fairness, diversity, societal environmental well-being, and accountability. But it's really how to put those principles and ethics into practice. There are some technical ways to do it with the tools that we have, and there are, of course, processes to make sure that what we develop is safe and trustworthy. I think the issue here is about having a culture of trust inside the organization. We have a saying, we cannot give what we don't have. If there is no trust and if there is no accountability in the organization, how this organization will develop something and will let the society trust it? So it's all about having this thinking, ethically driven organization. that the organization is driven by the ethics, driven by the risks. What is the impact on society? What is the impact of this technology, on our stakeholders and so forth? Building organization capability, whether talking about expertise, training people, training staff, adopting more holistic performance metrics. What are the metrics that we put in place to make sure that when we assess the performance of the AI algorithms, we assess them in a very good way? And then embedding accountability at all levels, how we can make this accountability in the whole life cycle, of AI development. I think foresight is important as we go into the future of this technology and the future of the technology in general. We need to prepare for the unexpected impact. We need to think of what, like I said, what are the risks that this technology will bring. We need to have a mindful AI, a more human tomorrow. We need to focus. We need to put the human at the center stage. It's also about the rise of AI and data ethics. Like I said, there is now certification programs from the Open Data Institute, from the IEEE, who certifies. So we see that a specialization is coming out, in about data ethics. And then we have a rise in synthetic data. Gartner predicted that 60% of all the data used for AI will be synthetic by 2024. But what if when you use, because why we go to synthetic data? Because our data is not good enough to train. We either don't have the big data and the quality of data to train the AI with. That's why we go to synthetic data. But when you train an AI system on something not real, think about it. Like what IBM case, when they have trained their Watson on synthetic data, and it failed to predict the correct treatment for patients. So this brings a lot of questions, global standards and regulations. And one more thing, we need to look into not just only the whole world now is focused on machine learning and deep learning, neural networks, because this is the technology that's proven to work, but we need to think of different approaches. That is the bottom-up approach. We need to think of also the top-down approach, mixing rule-based with, deep learning, so we can have this reasoning capability, within AI. Talent shortage. But the talent shortage problem, Gartner predicts that by 2025, 50% of the data scientist activities, 50% of the data scientist activities will be automated by AI using acute talent, and it will ease the talent shortage. So even the data scientists themselves, who are very precious today, and that part of what they do will be automated in the future. Increasing global partnership is important, whether it's local and global, and we have many global partnerships. The big tech, they have a partnership with the civic community, with the education systems, that they look into the AI into more responsible way. There are other global partnerships. The United Nations, the UNESCO, last year they came up with the AI ethics principles, which has been agreed by the whole world. 183 countries have agreed on those principles. But the problem now, the challenge is how to put those principles in place and how to operationalize them. And this brings, the last point is, it's beyond responsible AI. It's about a social license. This social license has 3 pillars: responsibility, the practice that we put in AI responsibly, the benefits that AI brings to society, and last but not least, the social acceptance or a social contract. Someone was speaking this morning, the Prime Minister of Bosnia was speaking this morning about a social contract. Yes, we need a social contract for this technology to be acceptable. Finally, I want to leave you with this word. As we see the future, so we act. As we act, so we become. So we better decide how we want to see the future. Right? Thank you very much.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you for reminding us of the importance of responsibility and trust. Oh my heavens, what do we have here to set up? Is this a teaser? Who's getting excited? Thanks, gentlemen. We have our last guest, Mr. Till Haunschild. He's a very good friend of many of us, any of us who have any affiliation with Ecosystems 2030. And for those of you who are joining us via live stream, please, looking forward to your virtual engagement as well. He's a magician. And he's also an entrepreneur. Wow, what the most unseemly of bedfellows. Together, he created the first music streaming service, which I just learned about today, in Germany, which was really cool. And probably one of the highlights of last year's Ecosystem is that he had his lovely wife and his 2 sons. Raise your hand if you remember those lovely boys that he brought. Such good kids. We have Till with us. He's going to surprise and delight. And so, really looking forward to this, Till. Welcome.
Oh, wow.
How are you?
Good.
Good.
Thank you. What a great conference. Can you help me, Nikki?
Why not?
Yeah, so come over here. So, first of all, I think we got the camera ready. Quite exciting. Finally, performing for a real live audience. So, we have cards here, and maybe let's just shuffle them. Okay. And then you can say stop anytime you like.
Stop.
Okay. Can you place the card on the top card on the
Not overturned?
Table? No, just place it down. Perfect. Now, can we get the camera? No? Okay.
We're waiting with bated breath, but it's an important step. Let's try to get that camera. They have to be able to see this.
Oh.
Till, while they set up shop, tell us more about this totally interesting mix of entrepreneurship and magic.
Yes.
I mean, you've been practicing magic for, as far as I understand, over 35 years, right?
So
You're second generation.
Exactly. So my father is a magician, and when I was 5 years old, he took me with him. He levitated me. He saw me in half. He's very cheap. That's why, because he always said, well, the boy is way smaller than my wife, so I have to use less wood to build the contraptions he put me in. So, yeah, and then I vividly remember the moment when I told him that I didn't want to become a professional magician and instead wanted to study physics. Oh boy. How can you do that? Do something real with your life, not physics? But I quickly realized how much magic has to offer. How you can use the psychology and the tool set of a magician in everyday life and in business. And so with the help of magic, I was able to create around 8 companies and captivate millions of people. I think we are almost ready. So maybe a quote from myself. Normally it's important that you quote someone famous. I quote myself, and the quote goes like this: I was never exceptionally good at anything except making people believe that I am. So let's hope I can convince you as well. Yeah, it just feels so amazing to finally, after so many days and years, to perform for a live audience. You see, magic is a communication act. It's like comedy. It only really works in a social setting. where you have an audience that actually can understand the joke and laugh. So I spent the longest time only with Siri. Hey Siri, how are you?
I'm pretty good, thanks.
Okay, good. By the way, hey Siri, how long was the lockdown?
Lockdown was first released 21 years ago, on Friday, September 15th.
I think sometimes she doesn't want me to understand, just like my wife. Hey Siri, how long... Hey Siri, how long was the lockdown?
536 days.
Really? That long?
This is simulation 616, isn't it?
Simulation? Hello? I think she just crashed. Let's try it one more time. I think, oh, the camera is working perfect. Now, let's try it one more time. Hey Siri, how long was the lockdown?
536 days.
Really? That long?
This is simulation 616, isn't it?
Simulation?
Yes, please check Nikki's card. In simulation 616 it is always the Ace of Hearts.
Ace of Hearts? Well, but, hey Siri, this is just a coincidence.
No, simulation 616. There is no coincidence, and everything is predetermined.
Yeah, sure, no coincidence. Okay, let's try it differently. Maybe, Nikki, you can freely choose a card, just point to it, whichever you like.
Choosing here.
So, this one? Okay? Yeah? Yes, everyone sees. Now, I want you to, let's put the card back. And maybe you can shuffle the cards a bit.
Oh, yes.
Just
I was
go-
in Vegas just 2 days ago, and I didn't do very well there. Okay.
Yeah, just a quick overhand shuffle and cutting.
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good enough?
Yes. So, hey Siri, you claim this isn't real?
Here's This Is Not Real Love, featuring Mutya by George
Don't keep. Hey Siri, you claim this isn't real?
If you can't tell, does it matter?
Good question. Probably not.
And even if we are not real, this moment between us is real.
Oh, that's nicely said.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, but, yeah, I think now this time, let's hide. Okay, doesn't disappear. No. But, hey Siri, this time you don't know her. Hey Siri, this time. Hey Siri, this time you don't know her choice.
Sure, I know. There is no free choice either. She always chooses the Ace of Hearts,
No,
and
that
it
was
is together
before.
with the other aces on top.
Okay. You chose the 3 of spades, correct? No.
5.
5 of spades.
5 of spades.
Okay.
Did I? Check me. It's late in the evening.
Yes? Okay. Okay, let's try it one more time. Hopefully, I hope it gets... Why is it still showing the music thing? Okay. Okay. But, so you clearly see that this is a premiere. Okay. But, hey Siri, This time, you don't know her choice.
Sure, I know. There is no free choice either. She always chooses the 5 of spades, and it is at the 5th position.
At the 5th position? Okay.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5? No.
And by the way, the top 4 cards are the aces.
The top 4 cards are the aces? Okay, that's true. But the 5 of spades is missing. Ah, no, it's at the bottom. Okay. Well, anyway, no coincidence and no free choice, somehow. But if I know my future, I then can decide to choose otherwise and have still a free will. So, hey Siri, which card will I pick?
You'll need to unlock your iPhone first.
Okay.
So,
Hey Siri, which card will I choose?
you will keep the blue card.
Okay, so I just keep the red one.
No, you have the blue card.
No, I have the red one, and there is clearly the blue card. Oh, that's impossible. Well, how could that be? But now the blue card is right here, and I have the red card. Hey Siri, but now I have the red card.
No, you still have the blue card.
No, I just wanted the red card. Ah, shit. Okay, so that's not working anyway. But maybe, yes, there is one thing you cannot simulate, and that is quantum physics. Of course. Hey Siri, do you know what I mean? Hey Siri, do you know what I mean?
Of course, you are talking about quantum entanglement.
Correct.
But I doubt your small human brain can fathom this phenomenon.
It's not that hard. So basically, if you have two elemental particles created exactly at the same time, they behave as if they were one particle. No matter how far they are apart, if you do something to one, it automatically happens to the other. Now, the great thing is this phenomenon also exists with cards. If you have two decks that are printed exactly at the same time, they behave as if they were one deck. Nikki, please, can you shuffle the cards? And I get rid
Do
of...
a better job this time. Just one shuffle.
Yes, or you can go for
Oh,
two.
man, look at that.
At least
Should I do
she
a
is
bridge?
listening. Okay, no, just place them down and cut the cards to make sure that I didn't peek a card. Yes.
Okay.
And now, and maybe now this is yeah, exactly. So what did I tell you? Everything that happens here should happen here. Can you take the top card and turn it over and show it to the camera? Should be a random card. Okay? A little bit down, so like this. Okay, good. Now take this card and put it maybe under the box. Just put it under the box.
Underneath.
Yes, under the box. Just slide it under. Yes. I love this part because I don't have to do anything. It already happened. If you check, there's already a second card. And of course, it's the same. Now, is it coincidence or is it science? We need to prove more. So, Nikki, again, please, can you cut again? Just to have, yes, perfect. Yeah, oh good. Just like this. And I do the same here because, you know, this phenomenon is used in quantum computers. It is used to transfer information. So we don't have to look here to find out which card is on top, but rather we can just cut those cards as well. And then we know that here, of course, is the same card.
Oh, stop.
One last try. Good. Take
Another cut.
One more
cut.
Perfect. Now, and really, you can even go for one more shuffle.
Yes, yes, yes.
Just one last shuffle so that it's really mixed. We want to make sure that we are not in a simulation, correct? You bent them a little bit, but it's okay. Now, I want you this time take the top card, don't show anyone, and don't look at it, put it on the table, please. Just face down.
Top card.
Top card, face down on the table, and turn all the cards around.
Like so.
And put this one in between. Yes, and all turn them back around. Perfect. Now, in order to find out which card you put face up in this deck, you can, of course, look here, or take
underneath.
No, in this deck, take the cards and spread them on the table, just like. Yes,
upside down.
No, like this. Just go like this.
Okay.
Yes.
Like this.
And there it is. There is one card, is face up, and now we know that, of course, here it's also the 5 of hearts. So now, you just to make sure it's really well mixed, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you mixed your cards, so now maybe you can follow. Oh, sorry. You can follow along. We check your cards; they seem mixed as well. Just do as I do. Okay, like this.
Same.
One more. Come on.
It's crazy. What?
I think this takes a while, so I think we skip like this. I do this like that, and like this. And you see that all the cards, the 3, the 10, the 6, the ace, the 9, the 3, all up to the ace, the 5, the king, the jack, the 2, the 10, and the 9, and so forth are the same. Thank you.
I'm officially tripped out.
And that's the proof we need. Hey Siri, we are not in a simulation.
Okay, believe whatever you want to believe.
Okay, let's go with that. Now, let's get rid of the mess a little bit. Now, I think magic is similar to a dream. Everybody understands that it isn't real, but it sure feels like reality. And most people think it's about deception. The magician waves his hand here and does something sneaky with the other. But in reality, it's a deception of free will. So the magician deceives the spectator into believing they have a free will, but in reality, he controls everything. I need a volunteer. Yeah, please come on stage. Yes, round of applause. So we have here, again, a few random cards, okay? Now, let's give it a quick shuffle. Now, the first technique is called a force. The magician forces a card onto the spectator. Hey Siri, name a random card.
Sure. Let's use the 10 of hearts.
Okay, 10 of hearts? Good. Now, I will place down cards one by one like this, and whenever you want, you can say stop.
Stop.
Now, do you remember which card Siri named? 10 of hearts. That felt like a free choice, correct?
Yes.
Now, if we check which card you ended on, it's the 10 of hearts, and not the 7 of spades or the 4 of spades. So essentially, it works like this. It's after I stop talking, it's called the classic force. After I stop talking, she will count down 4 cards and then say stop. But it works like 95% of the time. Now this time, you know that, okay?
Okay.
So we do it a little bit differently. Okay. Let's just quickly shuffle again. Yeah. Okay. Now, you have the free choice of naming any number between 1 and about 40. Which one do you want?
29.
29? Okay. Okay, let's count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. This is 29. You remember the card? What did Siri say? Yes. Which one? What? 10 of hearts? Yes?
Okay.
This felt like a free choice, correct? But if we check here, it's of course the 10 of hearts and not the 10 of spades. Just wait a second. Now, that's a prime example on how to deceive someone of an agency they don't have. It's really similar to a computer game. The player thinks he has all the free choice, but in reality, the game designer already accounted for all the possibilities. Hey Siri, what's your take on this?
You humans are so predictable. You need the illusion of free choice even if you are living in a deterministic world.
Yes. Now, well, let's play a little game, okay? Can you join me on stage? Now, I have here a coin, yeah? And I want you to hold it like this behind your back. Yeah, like this. And face me, please, so I cannot peek. Now, the game's pretty simple, yeah? In a moment, I will ask you to place the coin in either hand, yeah? You can choose the hand that feels right to you, and the one that you have left, you can leave it empty. Okay?
So
now,
shall I have
no, just
this in one hand?
yeah, just like this. You put it in one hand and close your fist and bring the fist forward. Okay? Yes. And now you can turn around so everybody sees. Hold them up. Did you hear what I said? Yeah? Now, people think I forced her to take the coin into the right hand. Yeah? But in reality, people tend to do the opposite of what I'm told. So this is her right, and this is her left hand. And I think you put it in the left. Can it open? No, she did it. Is that right? Okay, good. Good to know. So try one. No, okay. One more time. So this time, hold it like this again. And this time, probability-wise, it should be, she should, or statistically, she should put it in the other hand, like 50-50. But she knows that I know that, so maybe she puts it again in the right hand. But she also knows that I know that she knows that I know. So who knows? So free choice, please take it in any hand you like. Okay. Get it? Yes, and yeah, again. So again, this is the left and this is the right hand. And I think you again put it in the right hand. Show it? Yes, okay, good. Now, one more time. Okay. And so tonight there will be a moment where you think to yourself, I should have put it in the left hand. Maybe it feels good in the left hand. But you can stick to the right hand. Yeah, it's free choice. Decide now, please. Okay? And bring it forward. Now I want you to do something in a minute. Yeah, just wait in a moment. You cross your hands like this or like this, no matter how you do it, either. So let's do it. No, keep it like so you kept it like this. Yeah. Now, the tricky thing is she's hiding in obvious sight because she already put it again in the top hand. So people tend to put it on top, show it that it's the right again. So last chance, just last chance, because that's your last chance to actually feel the coin in the left hand. Yeah? So last chance to decide which coin in which hand. Okay? Bring it forward. And maybe you can, we switch sides so that's, and show it to them. Yeah, like this. Yeah, it's okay. So who thinks she put it in her right again? Show of hands. Okay, and who thinks this time it's in the left? So let me tell you, most people tend to keep doing what they're doing, so I think you keep it in the right. Yes. So you never know how it feels in the left. So sorry. Thank you. Now, my take on magic is actually, it's a good magic trick is the exact opposite of a good joke. You see, in a joke, you